Hello, everybody. Welcome to my cultural anthropology class. We experienced some issues at the Taylorsville campus this week. Therefore, I'm going to record both of this week's classes, upload the necessary information to the Canvas, and post your assignments. We will meet in person again next Tuesday. Thank you for your understanding. We are going to cover our Tuesday class, and this topic is special because it relates to one of my research projects and publications. Please follow along with the slides while listening to my lecture. So let's get started. Slide number 2, Introduction to Anthropology, Week 5, Tuesday. Slide number 3, we have the syllabus. Slide number 4, remember. We are going to talk about art. Art is a part of the culture. Slide number 5, objectives. The objectives of this class are to understand the role of anthropology in including and integrating art from other cultures into the modern world, to value other forms of art that enrich and strengthen coexistence, to provide equality and recognition for new artists, to have a holistic view of art and its relationship with politics and economy. Slide 6. Remember that in Western cultures today, there are two opposing artist movements that works like two opposite cultures, culture and counterculture. The formalist movement, and a sense that does not change, with a substance that apparently transforms it, while the postmodernist movement is relativist. In postmodernism, you don't need an art object or even an artist. You only need a price in the market. Slide number 7. Do you remember this artwork? Its title is Comedian. It was sold for $1 million. After the sale, 5 more replicas were made and all of them were sold. The artist, Mauricio Catalan, became part of Western art history. Before this, he was barely known. The question is, if this is possible in Western cultures, why not integrate art from non-Western cultures? Slide number 8. For a long time, Western cultures have considered architecture, sculpture, painting, music, and poetry as the fine arts. Some people believe this position is ethnocentric because it discriminates against other types of art. It places Western developed arts above the arts of other cultures. Some extreme formalist positions still consider only these 5 as the true fine arts, although in recent years some formalists have added dance and cinema as the new fine arts. They are still arts that developed inside Western cultures. Slide number 9. On the slide, you can see other ideas of art that exist around the world. For example, crafts, textiles, railways, yokes, medicinal therapies, martial arts, myths, and others. Some are intangible or and are passed down orally. Others are tangible objects that usually ends up in museums. Slide number 10. You cannot talk about Western art without considering the historical process of the world. The importance of studying Western art comes from its current dominance over other arts in the world. Some authors suggest that Western hegemony is the result of colonization, but today this word has a complicated negative political meaning. Colonization in the West was a historical process that was almost inevitable. Causes. The historical process that gave more importance to some societies and cultures than others. The need of the others to survive and exchange products. Exploration and human nature. Today's academics have different points of view. Classify them as negative or positives. Umberto Eco was an Italian philosopher who wrote the book Apocalyptic and Integrated, referring to people who panic and fear the other as if it were the apocalypse, while the integrate are already part of the system. The same thing happens in the field of art. There are people with positive views and others with negative views of the history. Slide number 11. From the negative point of view, some say that colonization, now often called colonialism, was the reason why other arts from different cultures were destroyed and devalued. They say Western culture was imposed by force and others were forced to accept it. Hegemony is that violent and destructive power that places one culture above another. In the worst cases, one culture completely destroys the other. Slide number 12. From the positive point of view, it was not colonization or colonialism, but the result of contact and exchange between societies. Societies compare themselves, look for better opportunities, negotiate their culture, adapt, and allow themselves to be conquered. They say globalization was not forced, but happened partly because of necessity and to satisfy the demands of the societies themselves. It was convenient for them. Slide number 13. I believe that today there are not intact cultures. All cultures in the world have experienced change. When people talk about other cultures after a vacation trip, what you hear is in the dimension of language, in the real of narrative, not reality. Remember, language is a representation of reality, not reality itself. In our time, there is probably no place that has not been influenced by Western cultures. Other cultures are immersed in it, including Eastern cultures and what we now call indigenous cultures. For example, people say China is very different, and in some ways it is. However, China adopted Marxism from Europe and today has capitalized its economy following Western economy models that have nothing to do with the ancient dynasties of China. Let's talk about indigenous cultures now and go to the slide number 14. One example is in the Museum of the Chart of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in downtown Salt Lake City nowadays. There is an exhibition of Australian Aboriginal art. However, it is sadly present under the approval of the church. Watch the video from the website. The you can observe in their web page image some indigenous cosmology, but they are given an interpretation similar to Christian families' values of the church. It is a fusion, a negotiation. It is a new indigenous art. Some people add the label modern indigenous art, to distinguish the traditional from what has been influenced by the West. But today, there is no pure indigenous art. Slide 15. Today, we see the label indigenous art in the media and in art events. Let's analyze this. I will use the example of Shipibo indigenous art, which I have been studying personally. First of all, know of the categories used to present or title their art exhibition come from the Shipibo indigenous and art are Western categories. In their own culture, they call themselves Honibo. There is no word for indigenous or art. They didn't use these categories before. Now they have adopted them. But these words do not exist in their original language. This is the problem. The first settlers heard from other Amazonian tribes about a group of people who look like monkeys. Monkeys means Shipibo. in the language of the neighboring tribe. When some organizations like United Nations popularized the term indigenous and Peru changed its laws to recognize lands and protect those who call themselves indigenous, many people began to identify as such. On the other hand, there is no word in their original language that translates as earth. The closest is kene, which means something more like a spiritual design, a mix of sacred and decorative object. I will give more details about this later. Let's go to slide 16. The history of Western art, mainly European and formalist, does not include the art of other cultures. Any encyclopedia like the famous Gallage collection starts with the Greeks and ends with the latest events guard movements, including postmodern art. Even postmodern art still does not fully include indigenous art, even though it claims that everything is valid and there are not rules. Art anthropologists are the ones who have helped us value and rescue the art of other cultures and understand them better within the Western world. Slide number 7. Text expert from the book by Franz Boas. He is explaining the meaning of a mask, a type of art from the Wakan Kuwaktu culture. They live on the Pacific coast, on the border between Canada and the United States. Remember that Franz Boas was the first to create an exhibition room for indigenous art at the Museum of Natural History in New York. He rescued, recorded, and explained these objects to the public. Slide 18. There are many books like this that helps us understand the difficult process of reassessments and adaptation after cultural shocks. In one chapter, it talks about a Native American family. It begins with the father leaving the reservation after graduating and learning English. He was told there were good job opportunities in big cities like New York or Los Angeles. Many Native Americans work on New York skyscrapers, and California was important for meaning and getting rich quickly. Other jobs were harder to get due to discrimination and language. He participated in the World War II, then received some money to marry and sent his wife to a special school for Indians. They pushed their children to learn English and get better jobs. Their children married with white people, and by the third generation, they had practically blended into general American population. This is the story of many indigenous families. Most chose to integrate and climb within the new cultures of the nation states. similar stories exist in all countries. In Peru, for example, it was called the process of whining. In Germany, the education system aimed to educate future Germans and create a single national identity, a monocultural nation project. Slide 19. Other works. Other works such as those by Paolo Fortis or Damian David are also important. Fortis shows how preserving cultural heritage can bring economic benefits through tourism. The Kuna in Central America rescued their cultural and began making crafts for tourists, which improved their living conditions. Davy, on the other hand, discovered how indigenous peoples in French Guiana, who had few artistic resources, began to create and invent craft objects, presenting them as ancestral to sell to tourists and improve their incomes. Slide number 20. Now I'm going to talk about one of the research projects I have done. It is about the Shipibo people, an indigenous community that originate near the banks of the Ucayali rivers in Peruvian Amazon. Today there are about 33,000 of them. They have experienced many changes and are one of the groups that has developed pictorial art the most. Slide 21. My research begins in the year 2000, 1 year after a group of Shipibo people occupied an empty area in the center of Lima. They had been invited by the city government to sell crafts for Christmas. However, after New Year's, they didn't leave. Despite several attempts, and no one could remove them. They are still there and named the place Cantagallo. If you check the slides from 22 and to 25, I will show you some photos so you can see the place where I did my fieldwork. There are many videos about Cantagallo on YouTube and the internet. Slide number 26. There I met Shoyan Sheka. It means Roldan Pinedo. He's a Shipibo painter and an artist. His story is interesting. Shoyan was born in the Amazon, studied in the school in the city of Galpe. He says his favorite subject was art. He learned a little there, but mainly learned to speak Spanish. After finishing school, he decided to move to Lima in search of better opportunities. When he arrived, he worked as a porter in a market. One day, a friend told him that someone was looking for people who could talk about Shipibo culture in exchange for some money. Slide 27. At the first time, a famous Peruvian historian, Pablo Macera, who worked at San Marcos University, wanted to learn about Amazonian migration. He invited them, talked with them, and since they didn't speak well, he gave them colors, paints, and brushes so they could draw and communicate through images. Roldan Pinedo started going there. That's how he began to paint. Slide 28. Roldan set up his painting workshop in what was also his house in Cantagallo. He can see how he painted. Slide 29. In these other photos, you can see the dyes he used. They were shoe dyes, the cheapest materials available in Peru. Slide number 30. Traditionally, the Shipibos have a religious ritual where they drink the extract of hallucinogenic plants. During the ritual, they have visions. They believe they can see the spirits of things that appears as designs, kene. These designs have always been present in their ceramics, weapons, or hunting tools. Roldan began using the resource and turning it into art. In the slides 31 to 34, Roldan Pinedo's works represent nature, animals, and traditions. They are drawn as seen in the vision and according to the Kene designs. Painting on canvas was not traditional for the Shipibo. It was adopted. The figurative style of the animals was also new. Slide number 35. Alfred Gell is an art anthropologist. His theory, present in this book, is one of the most used in the field of indigenous art. Gell says that the indigenous artist object begin marginal mass-use recipients. Recipients are social relationships within the host culture that can understand and translate their work. The artist must draw inspiration from their own culture to produce something completely new and unique, while following the rules of their culture. This means that in this type of indigenous art, there are rules, but they are not the same as formal art rules. It's not the same like formalism. Indigenous artists negotiate with the rules of formalist Western art and take advantage of the doors that postmodernism has opened. On the slides from 36 to 39, Like many postmodern artists, they need social connection that help makes their works understandable in the Western world. They also seek recognition as artists and economic values for their works. Indigenous artists like to learn, work hard to improve their skills, and progress to level that is difficult to imitate. Slides from 40 to 44, you can see another artist I made there had an almost identical story, but being younger, his art had better results than the older generation. On the slides from 45 to 46, the rules are the following. A. They look for symmetry. All they are the characteristics or the rules of the indigenous art, especially for Shipibos. B. The background is always dark and the colors are primary, as seen during the ayahuasca experience. C. There are not identical elements, even in repeated motifs or designs. D. The figures fit into the ancient Kene designs. And on the slides from 47 to 50, other artists like Harry Pinedo, Roldan Son, have had international success. He has exhibited in galleries and museums in Europe and other countries. His work has a political tone, unlike his father's themes. In his talks, he speaks about climate change, colonization, and the self-determination of his people. Slides from number 51 to 52, other artists like Sara Flores, perhaps now the most recognized worldwide. She participated in this year's Venice Festival. Her work is the most highly valued. On slide 53, this is a chart of all the artists I have followed. As you can see, the number of Shipibo's art exhibitions around the world is increasing. It only stopped during the pandemic, but then continued. On slide 54, I have all of this in great details in a book that I published in Peru, and I am currently working on its translation. Slide number 55, we have the conclusions and the anthropology of art studies or other arts in other cultures. It translates or provides the necessary tools of their reading and understanding, mainly in the West. For now, Western cultures are the ones that have value, recognize, and integrate other arts the most. The work of anthropologists is very important in this task. Slide 56. Why is anthropology important for everyone, Anthropology is necessary to rescue, understand, and value the art of different cultures in multicultural countries. Anthropology provides the framework, concepts, and studies needed to read and understand art from other cultures. On the slide 57, you have the bibliography, and also on the slide 58, you have the assignment. Is it a case study and analysis? Then we finish our class today, and I see you in person the next week. Thank you and have a nice day.